Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you all for being here. Mother, won't you stand up for a moment and say hello to everyone?
Thank you for coming, and I appreciate the fact that you all took this time during this COVID season, during this terrible stormy weather, to actually come here tonight. I didn't expect but maybe a half a dozen, but I'm thrilled to death to see as many of you that are here. And thank you all again for coming. I love each and every one of you. Want to say that?
Well, thank you, Mother. And we're here tonight because of this book. This is the hottest selling book in the state of Arkansas, and it is already sold in 32 states across the nation. And we're very excited about that. And tonight, our goal is just to give you a little glimpse, a hint, a little taste of what's in this book. This book is more than 30 chapters. It is over 300 pages, packed with information about our history. The first thing that you'll want to ask yourself when you hear about the Italians of Sunnyside is, where on earth is Sunnyside? I've never heard of it before. Well, there it is, right down in the corner, in the Arkansas Delta, in the southeast corner of the state. And the biggest landmark in Sunnyside or Lake Village, Arkansas, is the Lake Chico, the nation's largest oxbow lake. And so if you look up at the picture there, and you can see the water makes a very large C. And on the eastern side, you'll see the Mississippi River running along on the eastern side of that photograph. So within that circle, as you'll see on the far right image there was the Italian colony. Those are the 250 plots that were set aside for each of the families that were to come to Sunnyside. And each of them were numbered, and each of them were assigned to various individuals of the Italian community. And here on this map, you can see all of the lands that encompassed Sunnyside. And that ranged for about 20 miles from north to south and about 10 miles wide from east to west. Sunnyside was one major plantation. Cotton was indeed king. And Arkansas was the number 2 producing state in the nation. And Sunnyside was a major cotton production machine. One of the 10 top largest plantations in the United States, and Sunnyside was famous. And I want to put it in perspective for you how famous and how much stature Sunnyside held. If you look at these companies in America today, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Walmart, Sunnyside was of that type stature in the United States. And yes, that happened in southeast Arkansas. And during the Civil War, Sunnyside was devastated. The infrastructure was completely destroyed. And Mother goes into great detail in the book to set up the scene, set up the background, to let you know of all the factors that are taking place as this comes into being. One of the bad things in Italy at that time, you could not own land unless you were a part of the nobility. So this war-torn Italy, there were no jobs, no great outlook, no opportunity for owning land, and it set up this environment for an opportunistic time for Italians want to get away and to be lured to America for a new opportunity. So now Sunnyside is under the control of Austin Corbin. And Austin Corbin asked that question that you hear all the time throughout America today, and the question that my family has heard many times: how hard can farming be? Just plant a little seed and watch it grow. It's that simple. Well, that's what Austin Corbin thought. He says, well, I've got this massive plantation, so why not just run it myself and make mega money out of it? So Austin Corbin comes up with an idea. He masterminds a plan to establish an Italian colony, and that colony would be the labor force for his newly acquired Sunnyside Plantation. And in 1895, they brought over 100 families, 562 Italians. They arrived in November of 1895, and the following year, another boat embarked in December and arrived in January of 1897 with another 425 Italians. And there was great hope that this colony would be a terrific success. And the Italians were coming believing that they would have this great opportunity in America. And what you will find in the book, that Mother devotes a chapter to their journey. And she tells the story from each individual, from many families that came here. And you will find yourself, as you're diving through the book, that you'll feel like you're actually on that ship with those immigrants. You'll even feel like you can even smell some of the cargo that was on the boat, because these boats were used as merchant ships to haul cattle. And the passengers, our ancestors, talk quite vividly about what the smell was like, what the food rationings were like. And so you can read about what that reality was for them. And it wasn't as they had hoped. They came from the Marche region, the Emilia-Romagna region, and the Veneto region. And what's interesting about Arkansas at that time is that in the entire state of Arkansas in 1895, there were only 100 Italians in the state. And with the arrival of these first two boats of Italians, 1,000 more Italians entered the state and increased the population of Italians by tenfold. But unfortunately, quickly after they arrive, as explained throughout the book, a panic occurs. Number one, Austin Corbin dies just 6 months after the Italians arrive. And something more devastating occurred after that. Up to 125 of the colonists died. And I want you to kind of understand what an impact that would be. I don't know if any of you in this room have heard of COVID. But does anyone in this room know the percentage of Americans that have died from COVID as of today in the United States? I will tell you, it is 1/4 of 1%. Not 1%, not 0.5%, but 1/4 of 1% of Americans have died from COVID. So you can imagine what the Italians felt when up to 15% of their entire colony is wiped out by malaria. So a great panic did ensue. So what the Italians did at that time is they all got together. Corbin is gone. Their colony is disintegrating due to disease. The conditions are not good. There's high humidity, and the heat was unbearable for them, and the mosquitoes were swarming, and they said, we're leaving. We're getting out of this place. So they gather together and they send out search parties all over the country to try to find a new habitat for the entire colony to move to. And Mother walks you through in the book about the events that led up to how they all separated out and they started moving to different communities across the state. Some you've heard of as Taneytown. Some went to Hot Springs, some returned to Italy, and some went on to Alabama and across the nation. Other Italian communities were set up. So what happened at Sunnyside? Did they all leave? Well, the plan was for all of them to leave. But actually 20% remained. And I want you, when you look in the book, you have to read the chapter on why some remained. It's a very riveting account of why certain Italians did stay at Sunnyside. So the Italians were here, and the plan was, I've got to keep them on my plantation. And so what they did is they used tactics of fear and a system of peonage. Now, in the United States, when the Italians arrived, one of the things that was very prevalent on their minds was the lynching of 11 Italians in New Orleans in 1891. Now, many people think that the worst lynchings in America occurred to the African Americans. That is not true. The worst lynching that ever occurred in the United States was in New Orleans in 1891, where 11 Italians were lynched in one event. After the Sunnyside Italians arrived, more lynchings of Italians occurred. In 1896, just shortly after the Italians arrived at Sunnyside, 3 Italians were lynched in St. Charles, Louisiana. And then in 1899, 5 were lynched in Tallulah, Louisiana, only 60 miles from Sunnyside. And that news made its way all the way to Italy. As you can see in this newspaper picture, I cinque poveri Italiani, the five poor Italians who were hung in Tallulah, Louisiana, just 60 miles from Sunnyside. So there were 6 episodes of lynching in the last decade of the 1890s, and that was well made known to the Italians. And you read about these episodes in the book. The other system that kept the Italians on the plantation was the system of peonage. The Sunnyside Company paid for them to come over, their ship voyage to come over to the United States. It provided them food, it provided them supplies, it provided them farming implements, it provided them a mule to use on their farm for their 12.5-acre plot. And so you were in debt to me. And by Arkansas law, you could not leave until you paid that debt. And because of that system of intimidation, which was against federal law but not against Arkansas law, many complaints went to the Italian government. And the Italian government then put pressure on the Teddy Roosevelt administration to have an investigation of all the atrocities that were being reported to the Italian government. So the Teddy Roosevelt administration, under its Attorney General, appointed a very savvy, a very determined special investigator, Mary Grace Quackenbos. And she came down to Sunnyside with a team of investigators to see for themselves, was there any truth to these atrocities that were occurring at Sunnyside. So what we essentially had occurring around 1906 to 1908, there was this massive struggle between the charismatic Senator Leroy Percy and the determined investigator Mary Grace Quackenbos. So the investigation of Mary Grace Quackenbos uncovered unbelievable, horrific stories of cruelty and illegal labor practices, and it was characterized down to the degree of white slavery, as she called Senator Percy being involved in the slave trade. But Senator Percy had one trump card. Even though Mary Grace Quackenbos tried to enforce laws against him, tried to take him to federal court, those court appearances ended up in the South. And Senator Percy had a trump card. He was a hunting buddy of President Teddy Roosevelt. And so Teddy Roosevelt personally quashed the investigation and recalled the special investigator, and the charges that went out against the Sunnyside managers ended. And the reports of Mary Grace Quackenbos ended up being buried in the National Archives, and they were not discovered until the 1980s, nearly 75 years later, and we learned of all of the atrocities that our ancestors suffered there at Sunnyside because our ancestors, our grandparents, our parents, in mother's case, and great-grandparents did not talk about these things. They did not share with their children and grandchildren what they had endured. And Mother walks you through this about all of the events, many of the events of the Quackenbos investigation, and details for you, many of the things that the Italians suffered and what they endured at Sunnyside during this period of time. So the story ends, but oh no, the story doesn't end, because the Italians are here. They are acquiring the land. And the story doesn't end, and Mother continues the story not only from up to the 1930s and 40s, she brings it forward through today. And this is the robust community that survived, the Italians of Sunnyside. Here's a picture of many of our ancestors in the book. Now, in the book, what you'll find is that we have over 2,000 of our ancestors identified, and we have a complete index so you can quickly find your ancestors. So this book can be a stepping stone for you to help trace and your own lineage back to Sunnyside and move it forward for your own family and for future generations. Speriamo di vederti presto. We hope you all come to see us in Lake Village soon. We have the Sunnyside Museum. We have the Lakeport Plantation, where you can actually see the life of how people, what they experienced, our ancestors experienced at Sunnyside. The Lakeport Plantation is a very similar replica of what transpired at Sunnyside. We have the Heiner Cemetery, the only cemetery in the United States that is fully dedicated to Italians. We have the great Mississippi River. We have the largest oxbow lake in the nation, Lake Chico. And we have incredible land tours of the Sunnyside lands. And we welcome you all to come there. Many of you have your roots there. And I have to say, and I'm very proud, of all the work Mother has done for 50 years, I want to say thank you to her. Thank you from all of the descendants. She's done a remarkable job. And I'm just grateful, proud to be her son, and she has done something that we can all treasure for posterity, many generations to come. Thank you. Thank you very much.